What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. It's Tyler, it's Brittany, and well, free agency is here. The transfer portal is here. We are officially in the full swing of both off seasons. It's kind of crazy that this week is going to, completely change the landscape of both sides of women's basketball here, the pro and the college. Brittany, yesterday was the start of free agency negotiations, and frankly, the transfer portal still had the most exciting news. But we did have one thing, Brittany, that we're going to talk about. Talia Cooper going to Ole Miss. We're going to talk about the players from Texas that have entered because there's some pretty major names there. But I got to start with the WNBA. I got to start with Balloon Gate. How else would we start this, Brittany, than the WNBA subverting expectations by doing something silly to get us rolling for free agency? What was when you see the balloons happen? If you see this on your social media, just what are your first thoughts? Because I thought that this was so incredibly funny.
Yeah, I think that's just it. Funny, but also free publicity for this balloon company that, accidentally or whatever you want to call it, leaked their big balloon arch for, NECA visiting the links. And what's funny is that, typically, I feel like free agent things more so, I guess, maybe in the NBA is a pretty common practice. You talk about it, it's pretty out in the open. But for whatever reason, and I think some of it is obviously we haven't had kind of the buildup for this free agency of the W ever before. So obviously people are more interested in the movement and what's going to happen there. But, it gets leaked out that she's, visiting there or exploring her options. And then it was she's signing. And, then of course from there, every theory you can come up with happened. And then having to release statements. But it's kind of par for the course, honestly, for the W. You hate to say that, but it's a silly thing that happened that obviously caught a lot of attention. But what were your, kind of first thoughts about it? And, do you see that as a good fit too for the Lynx?
Yeah, no, we'll definitely talk about if NECA works there. But I'll tell you, my very first thought was, imagine having to be the person who tells Cheryl Reeve that the public now knows that Nneka Ogwumike is considering the Lynx because of balloons. I would have hated to be that person. And because frankly, yesterday, I was expecting not crazy news, but some degree of leaks about where people are going, where the visits are, anything, frankly. Because this was the only thing that we got was Balloon Gate. So then the balloons became the main character of the entire day, and the block was incredibly hot for the Minnesota Lynx when it came to trying to court Nneka Ogwumike over to their team. And it's just so WNBA. You think, and I don't know why I let myself, I was I think it's just because it was how much we've hyped up this free agency in particular. Because this really is more of the norm for the W side, where it's we don't really get a ton of free agency news. And even when as soon as I feel on the NBA side, as soon as the clock hits and things are available, you get rolling. And that has never really been the case on the W side in terms of immediate reporting on signings, things of that nature. So maybe it's my own fault that I expected this, but because I was wrong in my expectations, Balloon Gate became main character, and I think that is so funny. When it comes to Nneka in Minnesota, one, it feels cursed. It feels weird to imagine her in a Lynx jersey. I remember the clip was going back around socials of Cheryl calling her the biggest flopper in the league, and I'm please reference this in an introductory press conference if she was to go there. Please, that would be so funny. So from that end, it feels cursed. But in terms of the current fit, I think it's very interesting because one, you have Nneka Ogwumike, who is obviously in the later part of her career, but is still very much a genuine contributor on a WNBA basketball team, without a doubt. And I'm interested. One, I'm interested if it could potentially be a package deal with Skylar Diggins, because if you're able to get both of them, then you're talking about very much a win now move for Minnesota, but rightfully so. And we don't really know. Minnesota is one of the teams I think could stand to lose the most in this free agency. If an Atlanta Smith, gets paid more to go somewhere else, you're going to need to find a way to fill those spots. But for Nneka, I think that once you have feedback healthy, which I don't think we know the exact timeline
Mhm.
of when that's going to be, but to me, Neko Gumike is a player that can help you stay afloat whenever she's out, but also Fee is a versatile enough player where she can kind of do a little bit anything from like 3 through 5, and do it very well. And with that, you can have Neko Gumike on the court with her, and I don't think you have to worry about spacing or things like that. I think that an interesting part of this though is that out of any team in like the top like 7 picks, I think free agency is going to impact who Minnesota takes more than maybe any other team. Because if you go and just if you're running the hypothetical world of they get Neko Gumake, you might not draft Lauren Betts. If you get
Right.
if you get NECA and Skyler, that might rule out Olivia Miles, and like maybe you lean more towards an AZ Fudd to help space the floor and play the two. So like I'm interested. I think maybe if you're looking at the draft order and where teams are, I think Minnesota is one of the more interesting ones to see what they end up doing in terms of their early signings because, I mean, again, it's not like there's so much time, to get free agency figured out in before the draft, but I think no team will be impacted more by who they're able to bring in than Minnesota when it comes to who they're drafting. But for your end, I'll ask the same. Her fit in Minnesota. What are you thinking?
I like it if it were to happen just
Hmm.
because, like you said, I think she is, obviously in the later part of her career, but still someone that can help them win games with
Hmm.
the loss of, fee for however long that looks like.
Hmm.
But when she comes back, I can see them playing alongside each other pretty seamlessly.
Hmm.
Obviously, because fee is so versatile, but I think too, like inside more of a presence than really what they've had. I
Yeah.
think, because if you talk about Alana Smith, I mean, she isn't bad around the rim, but when you think of her, I think of her more as someone who wants to kind of shoot the three. And don't get me wrong, the links like that,
Hmm.
from her, but I think sometimes you're missing that low block presence, and someone that I think, of course, NECA can kind of do both there.
Hmm.
And so I like that fit in terms of just those two playing alongside each other. But when you add a veteran piece like that to a team at Minnesota, who obviously has a more veteran presence just
Hmm.
across the board, when you look at, what their team has been, I think, they're definitely more in a win now and what
Yeah.
that kind of looks like for them. That's what their franchise is. So I think, like you said, it'll be interesting if that were to happen, what the draft looks like for
Hmm.
them. And that's what I think really is the interesting thing about this draft and this free agency is, are teams actually identifying the needs, or are
Hmm.
they going to take the best players?
Sure.
And that's, because if you're talking, okay, yes, we're adding NECA, but obviously, like we've said, on the back end of her career. Now,
Sure.
do you pass up someone like a Lauren Betts that
Sure.
is going to be around?
Hmm.
So that's really interesting too. And I think that's why these free agency moves, I think, will maybe help us see kind of what that looks like. But
Hmm.
in terms of her at the Lynx, I would really like that move for them, if it were to happen. And like you said, if it was a package deal with Skylar Diggins, then again, that really changes what they look for in the draft. But overall, I mean, I think that would be a great move if they were able to, land her in free agency.
Hmm. So I think what we learned yesterday for WNBA free agency is follow your local balloon freelancers on social media because you never know where you might get your WNBA news from. Um, It's incredibly WNBA
Yes,
coded to have that happen.
absolutely,
Like
Tyler.
it was so funny though. We're all just patiently. I mean, I say patiently. I wasn't very patient about it. I was just waiting. I was ready for news, and balloons are the first thing I see on my timeline that it gives me any. And that I would, you know what? Actually, in hindsight, I wouldn't start this any other way for free agency. Crazy free agency of all time. Bring me balloons. Let's
Yep,
do it.
I
Um,
like it.
it was the transfer portal though, Brittany, yesterday that brought us a bit more of the news, a bit more of the chaos. I think one of the best players in the portal made her decision, and that is Talasia Cooper going from Tennessee, going and staying in the SEC, and ending up committing to Ole Miss. To me, this just makes sense to me, Brittany. Your thoughts on her move to go to Ole Miss?
Yeah, I think sometimes when you look at players that enter the portal, you kind of see match made in heaven and
Hmm.
type of places where you see them landing, and certainly that one is one where you're just like, yeah, you see her playing there, you see her
Hmm.
being part of Coach Yo's, the way she plays the game, and I think you're getting a very talented player,
Yeah.
and I think that's something that Ole Miss always is able to kind of do is reload in the portal. But when you're talking about someone who can come in and really, really kind of, I think, help Ole Miss and maybe take that next step,
Hmm.
you're talking about someone in Talasia Cooper because I think Ole Miss, it's really funny. They play somewhat similar to what Tennessee
Yeah.
tries to do, but I think it's just in a more like old-fashioned way of playing the
Hmm.
game, or what you typically expect. Not old-fashioned because it's like up and down, but I think when
Hmm.
you think of pressing and kind of playing at a fast speed and pace, that's what you think of when you think of Ole Miss. And so I think just in terms of seamless transition, that is certainly there too. So I really like that move. I think it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the portal shakes out for them. But in terms of hitting it, right off the top, that's a great move for them.
Yeah, it just gives me such similar vibes to, frankly, how I felt when Cody McMahon went there. Where I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm,
Like it's like not to oversimplify it, but like it really does just like add up. I mean, to your point, when I think about one, you just have to replace Cody McMahon first and
mhm,
foremost, and I don't know if there's a better one-to-one fit in the portal for like Cody McMahon did X for us. We need someone who could do X for us. Talasia Cooper can do this for it's the most seamless transition you could have possibly found. I feel like as Cody leaves, but to your point, it feels a very similar way in the sense of like when you think about what Cody McMahon did at Ohio State and like playing full court press, like very high defensive intensity while also still being asked to go and score the ball, and she ends up averaging almost 20 points at Ole Miss. Cody McMahon does like you think about what Talia Cooper did at Tennessee, and the defensive intensity and like the game plan of that is similar to what
mhm,
kind of Cody did at Ohio State. The scoring and with the substitution pattern stuff is a little bit different, but I think the capability to score is very similar. And obviously, maybe even a more potentially seamless transition to Ole Miss with the comfortability and familiarity with the SEC.
yeah,
Like Talia Cooper just always felt like an SEC player to me. I would have been pretty shocked to see her leave the SEC. And to me, as soon as she entered the portal, this was a landing spot that came to mind for me. And Coach O just continues to do it in terms of being able to. I think we've seen Ole Miss level up in the portal because I think
mhm,
initially you were seeing Coach O being able to maybe go find diamonds in the rough or maybe good value picks for the portal with what Ole Miss was working with, what the reputation was of Ole Miss. I think, and maybe Cody McMahon marked this,
yeah,
we see the start now of like the top players in the portal. Ole Miss is a very real option for them to go to and to go star at and to go. And we'll see where Cody McMahon ends up in the WNBA draft. Would not be surprised if she's a first round pick, you know. And
mhm,
so like if this becomes a thing where it's almost I'm almost intrigued in the potential of Ole Miss, maybe not to the same extent, but you see what TCU is doing in the Big 12, where it's like it's a similar strategy of like using the portal to like the highest degree to kind of reload every
yeah,
year. But I'm interested if the idea that TCU has kind of been able to manufacture and create their culture around of we're going to get you pro ready,
yeah,
but like finding out that almost like a different font, if you will, in the SEC with Ole Miss is something I'm kind of interested in. If that is a route that they are looking to take in that manner and in that messaging about what Ole Miss the program can become. So I'm interested in if they're able to try and do that, or if they want to even do that, you know, because that is obviously just one way to kind of market yourself as a transfer destination. But again, this just makes sense to me. Like not I mean, like it's almost I don't know. I mean, I think LSU maybe could have been a place where she
yeah,
landed. I think Tasia Cooper was such an interesting player in general because I think she could have gone to an LSU or could have gone to if you left the SEC and went to like a UCLA, you know, like there was landing spots because Talia Cooper can do a little bit of everything,
Yep.
where like she could have ended up just about anywhere. But in terms of I think staying the number one option and staying kind of true to what she's already done as a player and has established herself as, there was no better landing spot here than Ole Miss. So I'm intrigued by it. I think it just makes sense, and I'm interested if what else to your point gets built around her as Ole Miss again just tries and kind of break through that ceiling that they've hit in the SEC and trying to get into that upper echelon of the top, 3, 4 teams as opposed to kind of being in like that 5, 6, 7, 8 range, just over the years. So interested in that. We might have some more shakeup in the SEC though, Brittany, because the portal gives, the portal takes. Maybe more than
Portals,
anybody.
Tyler.
Yeah, maybe anyone outside of like Tennessee and Iowa State as well. Um, Texas might be one of the biggest losers in the portal as of now, and that I can't say that that's something I expected going into this portal season. It was not fully on my radar to this degree. Jordan Lee enters the portal. Justice Carlton enters the portal. Aaliyah Crump enters the portal. We'll see if anyone else enters and how that goes and how that shakes up from here. Obviously, you're losing several players to graduation, most notably Roy Harmon, but also like a Kyla Oldacre. This core that took them to back Final Fours is gone. I mean, assuming that they're all leaving in the portal and not coming back. I mean, that is obviously an option, but like the assumption is everyone's gone. Not again, just not what you would anticipate from a program that has gone to back Final Fours like this. So I'll just ask your initial reaction of seeing these players enter.
Well, I mean, very surprising, I think, right off the bat, just because, yes, Texas has added pieces in the portal, but like you said, like it was a core that had been there.
Hmm.
And so I think to me, it's just sometimes when you look at that, like a program like that, you're shocked because
Hmm.
it isn't like they've gone out into the portal every year and just added piece
Sure.
after piece, and that's why they're where they are.
Hmm.
It's typically kids that have been in their program that have helped them. And so, um, it'll be really interesting to see where they land because I think sometimes that's just as telling
Hmm.
is, because I think there's really three reasons I think kids probably go in the portal.
Sure.
One, money. Two, maybe get pro ready or whatever that looks like. And then three, maybe unhappy with whatever their situation,
Hmm.
currently is, whatever that is.
Hmm.
Now, when you look at those players that entered for Texas, I mean, they're playing pretty significant minutes. They're putting up good numbers. So that's always, and it's not like Texas hasn't sent people to the
Sure.
league. So I think it's really interesting. I think it'll be more telling where they land. And
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's they want, they didn't quite win the national championship. Maybe they feel like there's a better program that will help them get over that hump.
Hmm.
Can't imagine money. You never know. I don't know what Texas rev share is or what
Hmm.
they,
Hmm.
have to give, but yeah, I think the portal is what the portal is, and I
Hmm.
think you never know the real reason behind why kids enter or what it looks like, but I often think the next landing spot can give you a good idea of maybe why. You can speculate more of what that
Hmm.
reason is, but I think I read a quote from Lori Harmon yesterday. Just I think she was asked about the players that had entered, and she said everyone kind of has their own reason, like
Yeah.
I think, she's not going to hold it against them, but they do what they do. And, that's the interesting thing. But what's really going to be interesting is what Texas does to
Hmm.
fill those needs.
Hmm.
Because again, like I said, they haven't gone to the portal a ton to refill what they've had. And so
Yep.
I think it's a really interesting offseason for Texas because not only, like you said, graduating important pieces, especially Rory Harmon, but now you're looking at you got to bolster a lot in that lineup. And what does that look like?
Yeah, and we're not deep into the transfer portal cycle, but like
Mhm.
this is we've seen a lot of players going before this, so I'm interested, like, does Texas have time to make up ground on players that maybe that they would have wanted to be in on? Because, like, I'll tell you right now, the idea of, like, a Talasia Cooper at Texas would have been like, okay, like the defense, like that would have made sense, but that wasn't even anything that was on my radar because they didn't need her. You know, like
Right.
it wasn't a need yet, and so I'm interested in that aspect of the timing of it, from a Texas perspective of trying to rebuild. They have one of the top freshman recruiting classes coming in, so like there is a level of reinforcements on the way, but like again, like that is it's freshmen. Like how much do
Mm.
you want to rely on them? Like this is Madison Booker. Like this we're getting closer and closer to the end of Madison Booker's career here, and this is a player that you can win a national championship with, and you got to have a team around her to also help do that. And being able to rely on freshmen to do that, I'm is not the most confident feeling thing.
Right.
But like it as of now, it feels like they're gonna have to play a major role in this. But um, I just this wasn't on my radar
No.
to see this in this manner. And frankly, my very first thought was I wonder if, and this is just a speculation. This is just the nasty rumor right now. But this is just where my head went, and it's I wonder if the Vanderbilt post game felt good when you're winning, and then when you lose in the Final Four, if everything came kind of spilling back in, and
Mhm.
because we saw, I mean, I mean they were playing their best basketball this entire season after that game. You have the SEC championship game where they handle pretty calmly South Carolina.
Mhm.
You have the regional in Fort Worth where I got to see it in person, and they were destroying
Yep.
teams there. I mean, they destroyed Kentucky and Michigan. They were playing their best basketball, and it just came crashing down in the Final Four. And like I like the worst elements of Texas that scare. I know at least me when I'm watching them and like want to be confident in them. The things that scare me the most all came back in that Final Four game, and so I do wonder if it was one of those things where it's like, hey, when we're all locked in and we're winning games, that's a messaging that can unite to a degree,
Mhm.
but when you lose and maybe you feel like you hit a wall with the group that you're with, I wonder if that could be a catalyst to this. And again, that's just where my mind went with it. But I just this is a different era where like where it's so easy to enter into the portal, and so especially if you have you know whether it's teams or agents or whoever in your ear being like, hey, you can go get paid this to go here and play for this coach that might be more quote unquote player friendly. I, there's so many moving pieces with that that I immediately went back to Vanderbilt and I'm like, was this little did like maybe not little did we know because we
Mhm.
discussed that whole post game press conference a lot when that happened, but like
Right.
in hindsight maybe it wasn't the, you know, kind of kicking the butt this team needed to go and play their best basketball and end up becoming kind of what we feared it would be with an exodus here
Yeah.
into the portal.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting, winning masks a lot, like you
Mhm.
said. So I think it's easy to forget those things. But when the dust settles, I think the hardest thing about judging what's said in post game or you hear clips of
Mhm.
is we don't know the relationship between coach and player.
Sure.
And I think from the outside, it's easy to assume, hey, you went too far. You shouldn't have
Mhm.
said that. But
Mhm.
I think, the reality is some players enjoy that.
Sure.
Some players, I think, but that is something like we don't, as viewers or fans, or whatever we want to say we are
Mhm.
about the game or a team. We are not privy to 99% of what happens in a
Sure.
program, and I think as much as we would like to know and
Mhm. Mhm.
understand those things, it's not our call of, we don't know what goes on. And I think, like the hard thing is we turn the TV on for 2 hours and we watch and then we read things. And, of course, like you said, you're going to go back to that
Mhm.
post game
Mhm.
presser and think, oh man, was that the beginning of the end? Because
Mhm.
at that point, of course you're inspired to play basketball for the rest of the season because you want to prove what was said wrong,
Mhm.
and I think that certainly was the case. And
Mhm.
but then, like you said, when it's all said and done, was that the main culprit of like, hey, you know, I want to go play XYZ
Mhm.
because maybe this person is this. And I think, there's a lot of people that get in ears of kids. And just at the end of the day, I hope that's with the best interest in mind of the
Mhm.
student athlete, because again, they are 18 to 22-year-old young women that I think sometimes it's hard to know if you're making the
Mhm.
right decision. I mean, think about when you're choosing a school in the first place. Like,
Sure.
that's what's so crazy about the transfer portal is you are recruited for years before
Mhm.
you make a decision. The relationships you develop, the know. And that's another thing, like, you, in my opinion, know who you're signing up to play for. And if
Mhm.
you don't, then you're probably not doing your homework or you haven't been around the program enough. Because
Sure.
I mean, like, if you think Vic Schaefer's too hard, then, like, why did you spend, in my mind, it's like, well, you spent, however many years there, or
Yeah.
you did your homework before you committed to going there,
Mhm.
and so that's what's crazy to me is like, you make this decision and then the portal is like some days a 1-day decision.
Mhm.
And it's like, yeah, everything looks good from the outside. I mean, they could put up a balloon arch for you and
It
that would
could.
be amazing. But what is behind the balloons?
Mhm.
And that's what is really tough in this day and age is a lot of it is just what you hear or what you watch or what you see, and so you get in these situations and sometimes it does work out,
Mhm.
but I think we see so much of the movement because they're searching for something else that people are maybe telling them that's out there. And
Mhm.
that is the tough part about the portal is just it's really hard to know the ins and outs of programs because you're not given the time to really explore that.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think also I think it's important to keep in mind. I honestly had to kind of tell myself this too with it, where I'm like, this it was seeing an exodus of a core for my program does not mean the same things that it used to mean.
Right.
And now there's certainly examples where like it can be like, okay, what's going on with the staff or what's
Hmm.
going on like Tennessee, for example, is a bit more of a fair like, okay, let's question like the larger picture here. I'm
Yep.
not there yet with Texas. I think it's right to worry about what does his roster look like going forward and like what comes next in
Hmm.
that sense. But like there isn't any part of me that's like, oh my goodness, Vic Schaefer has, lost his touch of this area, or anything like that. Where I think in the early parts of the portal, especially before NIL like got ramped up in the way that it is now, if you saw again, if you saw this example in 2021 or where it's like, okay, it'd be like, okay, what's going on with the
Yep.
staff? There's just so many more factors right now that um I mean, who knows? Frankly, who could be like they like there's so many different aspects going on that and I'm interested in if we find anything out about that because again, it's the thing that makes this Texas one a little bit more unique is the Vandy press conference to me,
Mhm.
and just if and it's a big if that came into play at all. But I did want to. I mean, these are three players now that are going to be legit contributors somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm interested for you. If any one of these players has like a fit that maybe you're most excited to potentially see, like if you see them entering the portal and you see a need somewhere else that uh maybe you could see them landing at.
Yeah, well, I think the one we kinda touched on before we hopped on here would be Jordan Lee at South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
I think you see that naturally just in terms of what they lost,
Mm-hmm.
and how she would fit in what they play. I mean, again, she can shoot the 3, she's good with the ball,
Mm-hmm.
obviously knows how to guard, and so I think that one is, like, kinda the easiest one where you could see that kind of, fitting in, but again, it's really hard to know what they want,
Sure.
and that's an interesting thing about the portal is like, what are you entering for? And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, but that one to me was kind of the big one of like, yeah, that makes sense if she
Mm-hmm.
ends up there.
Yeah, I know That's one. I mean, UCLA for any of these three,
Mhm,
frankly. I mean, they just need to reload, and I think any of these could go and be legit contributors in very different ways.
mhm.
But I think any of them can fit at UCLA and make an immediate impact. I'd say the one for Jordan Lee that I really like is Notre Dame.
Ooh,
Defense, you're
yep,
still playing that, but you're in a much more, I'd say, friendly offensive scheme where you have Anna Hidalgo next to you, and that's you become the player she's kicking out to, on top of being able to go and do your own thing offensively at times as well. And that's if you're looking for, and to your point, that is what we don't know. But if you're looking for a program that has gotten guards of the WNBA,
right.
um, look no further. You know what I mean? Like
Uh-huh,
that's Notre Dame. That's guard you. And so I think that there's a very strong pitch there, in that sense for Jordan Lee to potentially go and just kind of be a bit more of the offensive force that Notre Dame needs. Next to Hannah Hidalgo, while also you're not dropping off any of the defensive side of the ball either.
mhm,
If you're Notre Dame and looking for, because now if you put, you still have Hannah Hidalgo guarding the best player, or whoever, really the
yep,
point guard at the point of attack as soon as they cross half court. Evan, the player denying the pass is Jordan Lee.
yeah,
That's, you can work with that. You know what I mean? So
yep, absolutely.
that's where my mind immediately went. South Carolina is, I mean, I think that's a fit just in general. To your point, I mean, 3-and-D players can fit just about anywhere.
Mhm,
And those are, I think, different degrees of need, and maybe what, like, different dials of what you'd be asking of Jordan Lee, where maybe it's a bit more of the defense side of the ball, and just like pure shooting and pure floor spacing if you're South Carolina. Whereas Notre Dame, I think you get a bit more of a mixed bag of what you're needing from her, where
mhm,
you might need her to go create on offense sometime, maybe her own shot, and get a little bit more of that variety in what's being asked for her. And if you told me that after playing in the Texas offense that maybe she wanted to be able to show a bit more variety, that wouldn't surprise me. Um, but again, that's what we don't know. I mean,
yeah,
that's what we don't know in terms of what is the one, because there's certainly always a TCU looming with
yes,
with transfers, with NIL, with so like there's also of that aspect in the back of my mind where, like, as much as I feel like anyone could go to UCLA because they just kind of they need people,
lost,
they
yeah,
need bodies,
correct,
and they certainly have the momentum coming off the national championship. TCU's also just always in the back of my mind. I'm like,
yeah.
it always could be them,
Yeah.
but
Maybe we should propose adding into the portal entry, like, "Why are you entering the portal?"
oh,
And then
that
we
would
have an
be
answer,
phenomenal.
Tyler.
That would be messy, and I would be here for it. I would. It's just a bunch of dollar signs across everybody's names,
Yeah.
but
Hey,
but you know
just
what?
some honesty
Let's
here.
just be honest.
Yeah.
Let's just be blunt about it.
Oh my
But
gosh.
yeah, I got a feeling across the transfer portal and across WNBA free agency, we're gonna be seeing a whole lot of dollar signs
Yes.
be
I would
thrown
agree
around.
completely.
Yeah, but Brittany, it's always great talking hoops to you. Again, we're in the full swing of the off. This week is going to shape the next, at minimum, year
Mm,
of uh our women's basketball calendar. So it's a lot of chaos. We're just, I think, kind of fully get it. We kind of dipped our toe in it a little bit. We had a couple. The transfer portal's been doing a lot of the heavy work. I think the WNBA is about to ramp up and crescendo here in the next couple days. But as always, lovely talking hoops with you,
always
Brittany.
great.
Make sure you guys are tapped in here on the Her Hoop Stats podcast. We're here Monday through Thursday, and on the Gower Hour as well on Friday. So make sure you're here wherever you're listening or watching, that you're subscribed, and also following Her Hoop Stats on all social media. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon.